Welcome, everyone, to Solar Sunday. This is CB Robertson, aka FIA News Store. I'm joined by Ed, aka FIA Terminos. We're here to talk about probably a number of things. We're kind of free forming this one, but we were toying around with talking about St. Patrick, among other things. I was getting lightly mocked in our chat for being a few days off. I'm not that early in the celebrations yet, although we'll try to rectify that over the course of the evening. It's Tuesday, correct?
It's always March 17th.
It's always March 17th. I don't know these things. I get mixed up with the drinking and the stabbing. I guess we're in Ides of March. We should have daggers. Where's our swords to stab Caesar with? It's the Ides of March. Anyways, it's close. It's a celebration of some sort. But I thought it would be a fun exploration because it happened to be, incidentally, we were celebrating the birthday of a family member who was born on St. Patrick's Day, whose name happens to be Patrick. And I learned recently the etymology of the name Patrick. We're mostly familiar with this with the Christian saint Patrick, who was famous for bringing Christianity to Ireland. Apparently, the story is a little bit mythologized. Imagine that. Like, might be exaggerated slightly how much influence he actually had. But it's been exaggerated in the classic and appropriate Irish manner. And he's portrayed now as like the guy who converted Ireland to Christianity. But his name was a Latin name originally. It was like Patricus or something like this, which got and so some historian is going to correct my genealogy here, but the etymology is correct regardless of if my history is on point or not. It got Gaelicized into Patrick or Padraig or however.
Well, and I think his birth name was some kind of Celtic name, long name that you can't pronounce without assistance. And then he was
something Welsh.
He was given the Roman name.
Because wasn't he originally English or perhaps Welsh if it's unpronounceable? But then he was captured by Irish pirates and then taken to Ireland as a slave. And then he escaped back to England. But then because of a vision or a dream came back to Ireland 20 years later.
He's Romano-British.
Okay.
It's the 5th century. So,
but what's interesting is the meaning of Patricus is related to the Latin patrician, which is like the noble class. And it's we see it's a Proto-Indo-European root, which means it ties in with another mythological heroic figure from Homer, Patroclus in particular. And they both refer to like the nobility in the Roman world. Patricus or patrician ties to the fathers of Rome. Think of like the founding fathers to the United States. That's how the Romans talked about their noble class. It's like the descendants of the founding fathers, the first fathers. I think patrician actually means of the father, or fathers plural. So that meaning of nobility ties Patrick to that class, at least etymologically. And same thing with Patroclus in Homer. The name Patroclus is derived from the pater kleos, or glory of the father. Pater, which we have borrowed from ourselves, of course, except we've got the Proto-Indo-Europeanized version of it. So it's just an interesting etymological tie-in for people who want to say like, oh, it's a Christian saint. Yes, it is. But they are also, there's linguistic roots that tie it to pre-Christian ideas about nobility and excellence and so forth too. And identity. I was reading a book. It's a very, very good book. I'm going to recommend it. It just came out in the last day or two. It's called How to Slay a Wizard by Owen Benjamin. And it's a very fun book. Actually, let me read a passage of it just to give you a sense of the humor involved, but then I'll go back and read the well, let me see if I can find it real quick. But like, well, I'll just read the relevant section. Owen writes, he says, and this is pertaining to wizards and identifying wizards. He says, every word you say has a tone, not just a meaning, a musical note. You're always singing, whether you know it or not. When you ask a question, your voice goes up. When you make a statement, it comes down. When you're lying, there's a hesitation, a twist in the melody. When you're telling the truth, there's a simplicity to it, a directness in the frequency. This is why you can tell when someone's full of it, even when you can't articulate why. Your ear knows. Over time, the more you listen to someone, the more their internal world becomes naked to you, because nobody can fake the melody of their speech forever. It comes out when they're stressed, when they're aroused, when they're cornered. The frequency betrays them. I thought that was such an interesting line, and it ties into names of things, because these names have a sound to them. And irrelevant. This is something we've talked about before. Have we talked about Cradulus directly on here before?
It's come up.
We might have to make a show about that. Not today, because I'm not prepared for it. But it's a funny Platonic dialogue, because it opens with someone very frustratedly coming to Socrates, basically saying, "Hey, he says I have the wrong name." It's like, what do you say to that?
Perfect thing just to ask Socrates about, if you've,
Yeah. But I mean, there's this old saying, right? I don't know if it's Asian or if it's, somewhere else. This idea that the beginning of wisdom is calling things by their proper name. It asks begs a lot of questions about, well, how do you know what the proper name of the thing is? But I think it's relevant to thinking about St. Patrick's Day and like, what is the meaning of Patrick? Like, you can think about the meaning embedded in the myth of the story of St. Patrick, and that's real and that's there. But the meaning of the name Patrick that precedes the St. Patrick is also present in the celebration as well, along with, and they go together, and sometimes they're exclusive. They're opposed to each other, and yet they are still both present in our experience of it. And this is what can make language and words with deeply loaded associations such a rich and sometimes confusing experience. Like the most basic example, I guess, would be like a word like cleave. It means both to sever or cut and also to cling to, which is like antonyms, but it's the same word. Well, it's not the same word. They're homonyms, but they're spelled the same. So anyways, it can get confusing. And when you hear the word cleave, both of those meanings, insofar as they are available to you, become present in your experience of it. Even once you've consciously parsed out the correct meaning in the context, the all of the associations are there at the same time. This is why Borges said English was such a wonderful, rich language for writing, is because it has all of these connotations available to you. But it can make thinking philosophically kind of difficult at times.
Maybe not.
Well, and that sort of begs the question of like, what is good thinking actually? There's when we can get into poetry and thought, probably not this episode, but we're going on like, is that like 3 or 4 tangents before we get to the main subject? So
yeah, so Yeah, St. Patrick is also the patron saint of Nigeria as well.
Oh,
I
really?
found out. Yeah,
I
yeah,
did not know that.
yeah.
Patron saint of
They
Nigeria.
he is the patron saint of Nigeria, and they have some name for him that's like the something of Ireland, the
Hmm.
embedder of Ireland, or something like that. Yeah,
Interesting. It's fascinating. We think of Christianity as spreading to Europe really in like the Middle Ages, like the 9th, 10th century. And that's true. A lot of it. My ancestral line on my father's side goes back to um the Shetlands. And the Shetland Isles were converted to Christianity in 999 at Sword Point, no less. It was an interesting story from Orkneyinga saga of it's like Hakon the Good, if I remember correctly. Some very fiery tempered Nordic lord, um the son of a Shetland noble happened to wander within arm's reach on a boardwalk, and so he grabbed him, put a sword to his throat, and said, "The whole island will convert to Christianity, or else the boy gets it." Basically, it's just the brain this intense like pagan devotion to this new religion that they didn't fully understand. It's kind of ironic in retrospect, um, but people often forget like Christianity was in Ireland in like the 2nd century AD, like really early, insanely early. I think it's like the second or third oldest church. Um, it's behind. Well, there's the church in Greece, obviously. The Ethiopian church is ancient, 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 and there's actually a very ancient church in India as well.
yeah,
Um, so,
yeah.
anyways, a digression, but these I think from the solar perspective and looking at human universals, the universals in the patterns of the spreading of religions in general is an interesting um rabbit hole to go down. And it's not the only religion that spread in this way, too. You could look at other religious traditions, whether it's Christian offshoots, different um Protestant sects or Mormonism.
I'm sorry.
Imagine.
Protestant sex is like an oxymoron.
Oh, we were talking about word associations earlier. Yeah.
SECT.
Yes.
Sex.
Yes. No, the other kind didn't happen. They had lots of kids, but it was immaculate. Anyways, the other one, I mean, sex and cults are an interesting tie-in in general. But you could probably track the spread of Scientology on a map too, and I'll bet it spread with urban sort of epicenters that it spread out from in a similar way. And just that tracking is an interesting thing to look at historically.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, like the Hare Krishnas, it was already, it was a firmly established smaller version within what religion already, devotional religion in India. But then one dude already in his 70s, gets, because some 30 years prior, his spiritual master told him, if you ever get money, print books and, go to the West. And it took, he's in his 70s, and he travels on a ship, on a cargo ship in the bottom of it, from Calcutta to Boston, and has basically nothing in his pocket but a suitcase of books and some things, and like a few like $7 worth of rupees. Ends up in the Bowery in New York, and all it took was a couple, sitting under a tree, in his saffron robes, chanting by himself. All it took was a couple of young guys to come up to him, and now it's completely global.
So what you're
A
saying is,
global institution with like 200 temples, and is completely taken root in every country.
so what we're saying is we need to go spread some books out. around the world.
Yeah.
By the way,
But
do check it out. We've got essays from both of us in here, poems, and the glyphs are a really cool addition we've been working on as a group as well.
yeah, your handwritten essay looks great.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
really
Thank you.
it's really pleasing to look at as you're reading it. Like it's very cool.
Thank you. And hopefully it will be a subject of interest for anyone who's taken an interest for or against with AI and chatbots like ChatGPT and Claude and Grok and these things. And are we concerned about it? Is it going to take over the world? It's really, that handwritten essay was really an answer to Heidegger's essay on the question concerning technology, and also Theodore Kaczynski and his essay on industrial technology and its future. Anyone who listens to this is like, Theodore Kaczynski, that name sounds familiar. He's better known, as he was referred to in one footnote in a math paper, for his other works as the Unabomber. But his essay on industrial technology, industrial society's future, has been very influential, especially in the online space today, as people are sort of swinging back against the explosion of digital technology towards a more, not strict Ludditism, but an anti-technology stance for the preservation of humanity itself and human agency. And he's got a strong argument, but the handwritten essay I have in here, which looks kind of like this, is my attempt at an answer to that. So again, you can find that on Amazon. I think it's also on the website.
You could invite people to handwrite it out as they read it, and create a scriptorium.
Be very tedious, but it could be done. Yes. One of my friends cheekily suggested that I should submit the JPEG pictures to AI to have it transcribe it for me. I was like, that's actually a good idea. And he's like, and you could have it generate a podcast based upon the transcript with talking points and quotes and stuff. You could do that, and there would be nothing self-contradictory in that, actually. The point of handwriting it was, I do think it's valuable to handwrite things. It engages your brain in a slightly different way than typing. Did you know that Friedrich Nietzsche was one of the first adopters of the typewriter?
I did not.
His use of it, though, because his vision was beginning to go. So the first typewriter was not like the typewriters we see today. It was this cylindrical ball thing where he typed with like one hand. And that was the beginning of his style shift towards this more short, pithy, aphoristic style. So like the medium that you use to write changes your tone slightly. And I think we're beginning to see that as people use AI to write as well, which I've also been doing that on the side. It's you have to be careful. You have to guide it very carefully, or else it'll say what it wants to say. And it's like, no, we're writing what I want to say. But the medium can change the tone and the feeling. The medium becomes a part of the message. This is a famous Marshall McLuhan line: "The medium is the message." And people, I think, often forget that the pen and handwriting is also a technology. It's an expression of techne. So it's and it was one that people had concerns about. So anyways, you can check that out, and the dozens of other wonderful essays and poems and explanations of glyphs. Wasn't there like an updated ritual component in there too? I'll have to go back and read through it again. Good stuff. But I do think that ties in again to not just the story of St. Patrick, but like just the name Patrick, which is like there's a common meaning to the name that takes sort of different forms within different religious mediums, but there's like a continuity between like the Roman patricus or patrician and the Christianized patricus or patrick, and the Irish padraig, which has its own set of connotations just based on the sound. But that Proto-Indo-European common root, whether root preceded or came after the original term, I think is irrelevant here. But and it's interesting not just to look at the differences that express themselves across different religious and linguistic mediums, but the commonality, the common thread that runs through as well. Which is like, it was pointed out that, you know, Patrick was, but in myth, Patrick banished all the serpents from Ireland. He banished the snakes, and
Pagans.
it has, well, so that's actually an interesting question.
Or Protestants, like which?
Well, the Protestants didn't come for another 1,000 years or so.
Yeah.
But like, he didn't get all the pagans out of Ireland. He didn't even convert all of them. He didn't get anybody out of Ireland, really. He didn't kill anybody. He had a lot of conversations and debates, and you know, he proselytized, but he didn't actually get anybody out of Ireland. He didn't kill anybody or anything like that. So, like, what is snakes? It is discussed in mythological terms as getting rid of evil, like the serpent is associated with Satan and so forth. And it's like, that is a lot of what the ancestral father as an archetypal figure did. He like got rid of the serpent from the home space to make it safe. The fathers that the word patricians referred to, I mean, they did kill a bunch of the barbarians around the seven hills of Rome, but mostly they like built the city and built the walls, and I mean, they did establish the city through warfare. So, but it's the creation of order in general, and like, what makes the fathers is our connection to the order that they established. So like that like mythological through line of, we're living in the order established by our ancestors, seems to be present in that name in an interesting way.
And I was thinking about the Latin patricius, but then the feminine patricia, and it made me think of Cleopatra versus Patroclus.
Oh yes, the same name, name, just flipped.
They mean the same thing, which is eus and ikia, masculine, feminine. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. But how do you get from, it's just like sometimes, we when it comes to Easter, let's say, we understand the bunnies and the eggs. We understand like the sort of
the
root. And also going back to like, he didn't get rid of the pagans. The Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church didn't get rid of paganism because it's part of their whole ritual system. But how do you get from this saint, chasing away evil, to like leprechauns and pots of gold? And because it's a trip, because like,
there is I mean,
we associate St. Patrick's Day here in the States with, a parade which has some seriousness about it, like in Boston, but we associate it with absolute, just hedonistic behavior, partying, drinking, wearing silly hats. But like in Ireland, it's a holy day of obligation.
Yeah.
It's like a serious religious day.
It's hard to know exactly. I think there is an interesting, I was listening to a YouTube video like 1.5 years ago. I don't remember who it was, but they were criticizing the depiction of religion in fiction. Because the depiction of religion in fiction, and fantasy, this person was saying, was too coherent. It was too synthetic and not organic enough. Every developed organic real religion has elements of incoherency and nonsense that just emerge from the organic practice of lots of different people over a lot of different space. And I think what you see in a lot of religion is and the Romans really set the precedent for this, is the integration of existing practices into the existing religious framework.
Yeah.
So leprechauns are very obviously integration of old Celtic ideas of like fairies and other, supernatural small creatures of the land. Even the word pagan is kind of interesting because it comes from the Latin word paganus, which is a derogatory like country bumpkin. It refers to people of the land. Heathen has the same connotation, of the heath. They're rednecks basically, and they have redneck folk religious practices. They're not urban Christians. And Celtic Christianity is a particularly interesting example of a weird third position, because Celtic Christianity is very natural. It is much more invested in nature than like anything we see in like Greece or Eastern Europe or Italy or anything like that. It's one of the few exceptions to the rule that I believe Thomas Rousel pointed out, that like Christianity was an urban religion. So like it really rides the line between pagan and Christian in the meaning that pagan had at that time. But yeah, like I think a lot of these strange beliefs, like rabbits laying eggs and leprechauns and stuff, arrive from that inorganic merging of different traditions. But also
there seems something that happens only here, though. Like I'm curious because I honestly don't know. Like, do the Irish, when March comes, are they putting up, little decorations of leprechauns and pots of gold?
Leprechaun traps. Yeah, I'm not
exactly.
sure.
Are they doing that? Or is it really something that came from the Irish American tradition?
Ian says his middle name is Patrick. The paddy wagon also came from this. Yes, the Irish were cops back in the day because they weren't fit to be anything else in the East Coast in the 18th century. They were very much looked down upon. This is back before cops had the prestige that they enjoy today. So, anyways, by the way, have you seen the movie Gangs of New York? Fantastic movie. Martin Scorsese. Great. So good. That might be one of my favorite movies also. Scorsese is so good.
It's one of those movies you can just silence. It can just suddenly be on and you'll just stop and watch wherever it's at.
Oh yeah. So good. Anyways, a lot about the Irish and the way the cops were looked at, the police were looked at back in the day, and the gangs ruling everything. It's anyways, an aside. I think there is, just as in linguistics, there are certain rules as to how languages morph and evolve over time. We could probably see, based on a similar principle, because my belief is that language and religion are deeply connected. That religions evolve and morph according to predictable rules over time as well. There's a trajectory, and part of that is the development of this sort of organic incoherency of little traditions that emerge and give flavor and that distinctive essence of the religion, the experience of what it is like to be of that religion to it. But that's very often does not come from the like core beliefs. It seems to come from some other source, which is sort of interesting.
And, you said that language has rules of how it develops, but really is a phenomenon that took place, and we're able to look back or out into all of these directions and see patterns that we now call rules. Like when it comes to Proto-Indo-European,
Right.
we can see all and the Indo-European languages. We can see like, oh, these sound changes are absolute. They always take place when you're going from Latin to Greek, or from Vedic Sanskrit to Greek, or from there to Old Norse. The sound changes are consistent.
Right.
And we call them rules, but at the time they weren't following a rule.
They're like tendencies. They're not absolute rules, because if they were, we would never have had the variety of languages, not just to start with, but that these singular, we are assuming, source languages moved into. Like Proto-Indo-European became Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, but it also became Proto-Germanic and like Proto-Iranian and like a bunch of other things. And it like merged with Turkic, and it merged with Hebrew, and it like did all these kinds of other things in different places. And if the rules were rigid, then we would not have the variety of languages that we have today, and we would not have the variety of religions that we have today. Did I talk in our last show, or maybe the other one, about the Catholic Orthodox split?
Maybe. I mean,
about how
we talk about
how
the Christian people a lot.
Linguistic difference. Well, we're talking about St. Patrick, so
yes,
it seems to make sense. It has been argued that the Catholic Orthodox split can be blamed primarily on the linguistic split. The fact that the Catholic Church spoke Latin and the Orthodox Church spoke Greek, and this exacerbated existing tension with completely unnecessary theological disagreements that weren't really disagreements so much as like very subtle misunderstandings that blew up into mutual excommunication and all this crazy stuff. But it was over language. And like my big critique of Islam, I mean, there's lots you can say negative about Islam, but the big one is that it is an Arabic supremacist religion. And I don't mean that ethnically, I mean that linguistically. It, like, the Quran is in Arabic. It is only valid and legitimate in Arabic. And the degree to which you become Muslim is the degree to which you are going to want to learn Arabic. You won't necessarily, but that's the core language that your values are native to. Just as if you are a Christian, you might be tempted to go Latin if you're Catholic, but the New Testament was written in Greek, specifically koan Greek. And, you might want to learn Hebrew as well, because there's a lot of relevant stuff there too. And in our case, it's a lot of pi, which like ties into a lot of these things. It ties into Vedic, and it ties into Greek, and it ties into Latin, but it's beneath all of those. And it's not like we're exclusive to pi, but like that's where we're getting a lot of the base foundational stuff, like pater, Patrick. So it's there's a limit to how much we can know about pi. Of course, it's reconstructed, going back to linguistics.
It's theoretical.
But
it's theoretical, but it's also
it's theoretical, but it's also present in our living language today at the same time. It is both of those. Patrick has Proto-Indo-European roots, and that pi source is present in our world today. Are you familiar with
when you study a variety of different myth systems, you and pay attention, you naturally see you see that, in the Rig Veda there are the Asura, And then you read the Avesta material, and those Asura become one god, Ahura. And then you look at the Germanic and you see Esir, and you see how they're all not just conceptually connected, but also linguistically connected.
Yes.
Why we don't really know. We know, but we don't really know because it's the past.
We know the principle. We don't know all the details, but Ian asked, when am I debating Andrew Wilson? Probably in 2 to 4 weeks. I could have a baby between 2 hours from now and 2 weeks from now. So like my timeline is a little all over the place. Andrew's pretty busy. But he said that he's definitely down and to just keep reminding him. So, I will do that every few days and we'll make that happen. On secular nationalism versus Christian nationalism. Speaking of, but I think we'll get into meta ethics and Christianity.
Will it be 8.5 hours long?
No, it will not be 8.5 hours long.
Okay,
no,
that's good.
That is just torture for everybody involved. I'm not big enough to do.
That's like house floor. That's like filibuster shit.
That's impressive. It's like impressive. I sat through the whole thing. I listened to the whole 8 hours and 45 minutes of it, and it was brutal. It was really tough. It was extremely frustrating. I mean, and the thing is, language plays a huge role there. Actually, since Andrew Wilson has been brought up, and we're talking about language relating to Patrick and Pi and stuff, allow me a moment to refer the Substack piece I wrote yesterday on the transcendental argument for God, which is what Andrew uses actually, as well as Jay Dyer. I wrote, it's not a short piece. It's, I don't know what the reading time is. It's a decent length, but it's worth reading if you're interested in this sort of thing. I just posted it there. And the argument I tried to make is that what we see in the transcendental argument really is a language game. It sort of hinges upon losing track of the meanings of word, especially words like debate and justification and what was the third one I used? It was like debate, justification, and knowledge. Yeah. And you could probably throw in a few other ones too, but like if you're operating from a correspondence theory of knowledge, that's different than operating from a coherence theory of knowledge. And you can make certain things sound absurd based on a correspondence theory of knowledge and then jump very seamlessly to a coherence theory of knowledge to present transcendental argument without the interlocutor necessarily tracking that shift. And that happens a lot. And so this someone within the order had asked for like what is the metaphysics of the order some months ago, and it got me kind of thinking, because metaphysics is such a tricky subject. People have been talking about metaphysics basically since Aristotle, so 2200 years, and philosophers still don't have a solid understanding of what metaphysics actually is. Which hasn't stopped us from talking about it for a while, but like that ambiguity about the meaning of the thing we're even debating, I think is really important. And it highlights, like, where do we start in establishing a worldview? Do we start with certain presuppositions that are linguistic, or do you start with experience? And the whole, like, the creator of the transcendental argument is really Immanuel Kant. He basically said, in order for X to be true, it requires these preconditions of knowledge to be in place, and that takes you into the transcendental realm of a priori beliefs. But first of all, there's a question of whether you can actually know those prior to experience, or if those are sneaking in under experience, but you're so much a fish swimming in water that you don't realize the water you're swimming in of experience. And second of all, there's a huge assumption. Kant was sorry to nerd out on this so hard, but it is important for people who are interested in this kind of thing. And it does tie back to language, maybe not to Patrick in particular, but to this question of language. Kant was responding to David Hume's skepticism, which basically said we can't know anything at a metaphysical level, including like causality, except what experience can teach us. Now, for most people, that is a really huge asterisk, and says, "Oh, so we can know everything that we think we know, anyways." Like there isn't a difference between experience and knowledge with like a capital K. But for a certain kind of philosopher, saying you can only know things by experience is akin to saying you can't know anything at all. And this goes back to the correspondence versus coherence theory. Correspondence notion of truth, quick and dirty, is that truth is what corresponds with reality. I believe the Greek is to eon. What is that which is? I don't think that's totally correct, but it's close. It's very Aristotelian. What coherence people believe is truth is what we would associate with aletheia, with that which is uncovered or revealed. And it is what hangs together. It is what is internally consistent based upon a set of given axioms. And the problem with the coherence theory is that it's only as accurate as your axioms. So we'll just have really solid axioms, like the reality of the external world. That's my axiom, and any stated axiom winds up being necessarily linguistic. So, and what words are, as we've been talking about with Patrick and Pater and all these other things, is they are metaphors that are not just imprecise and imperfect in relation to their subject. It's a map of a territory, not the territory itself. But they acquire more meanings over time. You can have a word like set, for example, which according to Merriam-Webster has 26 definitions as a verb, 24 as a noun, and 7 as an adjective. That's a lot of meanings of set. That's a lot of meanings for one word, especially if they're all present in the mind of the recipient as that flavor and tone that Owen Benjamin was talking about earlier, in the experience of the listener. And it can make accidental equivocation very easy to do. So language winds up being necessary for your axioms, for the coherence model to work. And at the same time, language is a bad medium to do metaphysics with. It's just not equipped for that based on the nature of what language is. What
is the difference between language and speech? Because you just said that language is a bad vehicle for metaphor, right?
No, language is metaphor. It's a bad language.
Yeah,
it's a bad vehicle
I thought for
a
second you said it was a bad vehicle for, and I'm like, we're poetry lovers.
Oh, I might have misspoke. I said what I meant to say was language is a bad vehicle for metaphysics. I'm sorry, I might have misspoke.
Okay, metaphysics. Maybe I heard you wrong, because I was going to say
I probably misspoke.
Yeah,
I probably misspoke. Yeah. So what we're left with is experience, and it's not perfect, but we can kind of triangulate what is likely, and we can triangulate from experience what is functional, and that's pretty good. It's and people can say, well, but you can be misled by experience. You can be deceived by your senses, which is true. But you can also be deceived by logic and reason
You can.
just as easily.
I think there's a very good chance of being confused, being misled by language than there is by just pure physicality.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because this is one of the things Scott Adams used to say is that educated people are easier to hypnotize because they've been trained to accept conclusions that appear to follow from premises. So whereas he says you might try to hypnotize an uneducated person and they'll just be like, that doesn't feel right. Not buying it. And they can't explain why, but they're not bothered by the fact that they can't explain why. Whereas a more educated person who's been trained in logic and in reason and in the scientific method will be like, well, I've been presented with a compelling argument. I can't see a counter argument. I guess it must be right. And they can be tricked by clever equivocation or hypnotic techniques into positions more easily than less educated people who are operating at that less linguistic, more visceral level.
And I wonder, is the use of language in combination with physical action, what's the difference? Like just somebody speaking or writing something, but let's say the use of language in a powerful way or a creative way in concert with physical action, ritual.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is where poetry shines. I mean, an attempt at this question was given by Yukio Mishima, fairly famously in Sun and Steel. His opening complaint was he said that words are like white ants with a tendency to devour even themselves in the absence of a thing to work on. And so it needs some foundation outside of words for the words to even if you want to protect the words themselves. I think I quoted him directly in Philosophizing with the Body, which is about this subject. It's in the Pater 2. But what I've come to is this idea that poetry is really the medium that we're talking about here, where you have the creation of meaning with words that comes directly from nature. And there was a poem that always used to bother me. It was called Ode to a Grecian Urn by Keats. And the conclusion was this line, truth is beauty and beauty truth. That is all ye know and need to know on earth. Or something like that. I always hated that because I'm like, beauty is not always true. There are beautiful lies. And truths can be ugly sometimes. I thought it was a stupid line. But on the other side of understanding the faculty by which poetry is written, by which we capture the experience of nature with words as directly as possible in such a way that creates a change of consciousness in the reader. Like the faculty that we have for identifying good poetry and differentiating it from bad poetry, from Vogan poetry or whatever, is like that faculty is our faculty for recognizing beauty. But if it is untrue, if our body recognizes that it's untrue, the beauty won't register. And so Keats was writing about, I think, the faculty of recognizing good poetry. And that faculty crosses the line between nature and language. It's not true in all cases, but it's an incredibly powerful faculty that I think is developed by reading poetry. Um, and poetry is tricky because the state of mind necessary to write poetry is not the same state of mind necessary to read and appreciate poetry.
Yeah.
You have to be very self-conscious, I think, to read poetry and appreciate it. But you cannot be self-conscious at all while writing poetry. So it gets tricky. But I think that's like a core part of it. And I think that's why to go back to the Christian stuff a little bit, what they made bishops memorize was not the New Testament or bits of Genesis or even Job. What they made the bishops memorize was the Psalms, the Psalter. And I think Western culture is really built on the poetry of Homer more than anything else. And I don't think you would have gotten the explosion of Greek philosophy without the language that was granted to the Greeks by Homer in the first place. So, bit of an aside there. Ian says the experience part is more practical, whereas the whole impracticality of metaphysics is because, oh, how expansive and confusing it can be. You know, yeah, they're trying to answer questions that they don't necessarily even know if they're the right question yet. There was a famous disagreement in the world of philosophy between Jean-Paul Sartre and Martin Heidegger, where Jean-Paul Sartre tried to claim Heidegger for the existentialist camp. There was this big divide between the essentialists and the existentialists. The essentialists believed that essence preceded existence. In other words, to put it metaphorically, a blueprint precedes the house that is built on the blueprint. There's an idea of a thing that precedes the thing. And the existentialists thought the opposite. They said, no. Existence comes first. The thing comes into being, and then we retrospectively conceptualize and try to put a label on it, put an essence like, oh, the essence of this must be this thing. A human is a featherless biped, or whatever the case may be. And he faced with this binary choice, Heidegger said, no, I'm not an existentialist, and I'm also not an essentialist, because we don't know enough about these things to, first of all, know if they're even separate. Is existence and essence, are those even two different things? And might there not be other options? Heidegger is interesting because he was one of the philosophers behind Wittgenstein, I think, who was most aware of the problem of language for thinking clearly, which led to his own very weird idiosyncratic use of language in his work, which is barely decipherable, but still very good. Ian says, very circular language speaking. Yes. You can be deceived by Andrew Wilson. Well, yes, we can all be deceived. Hopefully, I've equipped myself well enough. We will see. He also says he loves the poorly educated. Well, I love my kids, and they're not very well educated yet, although my daughter was learning about square roots earlier today. So we're working on it. We're working on it. Not too educated, though. Not so educated that you lose your sense of, trust in your gut, although that can be educated as well. Are you familiar with The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker?
No.
It's one of these books that gets recommended in law enforcement, military circles a lot. Basically, it's a long book by a self-defense expert that says, hey, if you have a bad feeling, don't let feelings of politeness or political correctness get in the way of trusting your gut and going to the other side of the street or doing anything. Don't be afraid of offending people, because and he's got some statistics in there about like most people who become victimized by some random violent crime, like they had some premonition, but they ignored it. They didn't ignore it. They pushed it. They repressed it. They pushed it down. So you can be educated to trust your body. more.
Yeah, for sure. Now I'm just tripping in my head about poetry right now, and
Oh,
about
there's
metaphor. I mean, that's like 90% of my
there's
mental
so much
state
to it. It's
every day. It's just the relationship, the way, religious poetry or epic poetry, just the way the metaphors work, and that it's sort of getting to a sort of truth that there might not be words for, but via but the vehicle is understanding the relationship between one thing and another, like understanding the force and the power behind a horse bucking and kicking its feet back, relating that to something else. The relationship between it gives you kind of an epiphany of strength, for instance. It's really hard to
yeah,
explain, but it happens.
yeah,
I think
and like
Rig Veda, a lot of the metaphor in Rig Veda is sort of, it's like that. It's drawing connections between nature and language and human beings in order to express a truth, in order to create and create an epiphany of reality that is unseen and brought together because of the combination of these relationships between things through metaphor.
yeah, and it's in the Rig Veda. Is like allow me to bring up quickly before we close out here an example from Homer, and I'll use the translation of my Christian friend here. Um, Sam, he did a translation of Homer in dactylic hexameter, where a dying man is compared to a falling mountain tree. And this is his translation. This is from Iliad 13, 389 to 393. He fell as the oak or the poplar, the great mountain pine tree, hewn down by the sharp-edged axes of workmen as timber. So before horse and chariot he lay like a keel in the dirt there, drawn out and bleeding and clutching the blood-blackened dust tight.
Mm.
And it's like, not only is there a metaphor of like falling like a tree, but like you're falling like a tree that's about to be turned into a boat. Like there's a lot of richness in the imagery there, because you think, oh, boat, like black tar and stuff, because it's the black ships, right? His blood soaking the ground with that blackness too. And like something more is about to happen to him that hasn't already happened to him. That's they're gonna strip his armor and all that stuff. There's just but it's that metaphor is deeply in the world of the Greeks of that time too.
Yeah.
So it's the layers of depth and vividness there is really incredible.
It
And he
creates
did.
the experience of understanding death in that regard. Iliad has a lot of great metaphors that create a sort of, to the listener or to the reader, well, when it's done sincerely, you have these little epiphanies of understanding violence or death
Yeah.
when you read the Iliad.
Yeah. Ian asks, is there a type of poetry that doesn't rely on relationships, or is the core of poetry to express the correspondence of two things? The poetry is a little bit like comedy in that it sort of defies definition. The best functional definition of poetry I've heard is the perfect words in the perfect order. It's kind of open-ended.
And it has a lot of techniques. There is extremely broad in the
like
way that language can be used.
metaphor and simile are one set of tools, and it's a very common set of tools. It's a very powerful set of tools. It's not the only set of tools.
Exactly.
If you read Shel Silverstein's poetry, for example, like The Giving Tree or Light in the Attic, these things, he almost never uses metaphor. It's just simplicity. And who's that like Canadian Indian poet who's like, she like tries to be Shel Silverstein and fails miserably? I think Shel Silverstein does okay. His like Indian Canadian female would be imitator is just awful. But
there's also meter. You know, when it gets more sophisticated, there's meter, and then there's also arranging syllables in a different way within a specific meter, switching meters.
One of the biggest criticisms of the Emily Wilson translation of the Odyssey, for example, I mean, there's many, but she does a very good job of putting Homer's prose into iambic pentameter more or less literally. Like she's more literal than a lot of the other translators. But aside from her feminist injections that get really annoying after a while, there's something lost in the when there's something lost when you go from that dactylic hexameter to just prose, which is what Fagles and Latmore do. But you go past that neutrality, and it's not like going halfway back. It's going in a completely different direction when you take dactylic hexameter and take it not just to prose, but into iambic pentameter. There's like a different tone to it. It's lighter. It's more, I hate to use the word cute because that's not the right word. That's a poetically imprecise word, but it's not as heavy as dactylic hexameter. Also, there's a lot less syllables, so you have to take out a lot of the content too. Which so a lot of the criticisms of her poems feeling like soulless or whatever, which is like I don't think that's fair, but it is fair to think to say that she has compressed it slightly. It takes like 2/3 the time to read 3 pages of Emily Wilson than it takes to read 2 or 3 pages of Lattimore. Lattimore is very heavy. Lattimore keeps everything. So Fagles is a little bit lighter and faster. But you know, the meter changes the feeling. Also the word choice. One of the greatest writers to really focus on the sound of the words themselves was J.R. Tolkien. And J.R. Tolkien's books are full of songs. Songs are his way of putting in poetry, right? And people think some people get annoyed by the songs. They think the songs that they just like skip past the songs and continue with the story. It's like no. The songs are a big part of the feeling of this world, you know, with or without the music, just the sound of the language itself. J.R. Tolkien began The Hobbit with the sound of the sentence, in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Like something about the sound of that sentence. He wrote it on the back of a student's paper that had some like extra space on the back. He liked the sound of the sentence. He just wrote that sentence on the back, and then that led to the entire world of The Hobbit, and then eventually The Lord of the Rings. Which, like, by the way, when you think about it, why The Lord of the Rings? Why not the, like, Lord Sauron or like the Battle of Middle Earth? There's so many titles that he could have chosen. And The Lord of the Rings is not a semantically intuitive title. But it's like the sound of the language is important. Not more than the meaning, but like as important as the meaning. And that's like a bit, and this is a reason to read Cratylus if you're into Plato. It's a very short dialogue, not like the Republic or the Laws or anything crazy like that. But maybe we could talk about that. You know, maybe we can actually do a Cratylus analysis. Oh, could probably read the whole thing in an hour, but that would be probably a bad use of a Solar Sunday. We can at least talk about it though. Yeah. Are we planning on talking with Vidaris next week?
Demoritus.
Sorry.
Next Sunday will be at the tail end of the Arizona Ritual event.
Okay.
And so there's a possibility that we might do the show from there.
Oh, cool. Okay.
It was briefly discussed, like, oh, let's do it with 10 guys.
That'd be cool.
But the week after that, we the plan is to bring our bull Demoritus on to talk about some Lord of the Earth aspect stuff.
Excellent. Cool stuff. Well, that seems like a good spot to end. There's a good chance I'm going to be out of commission next week if the baby comes. So,
Babies.
yeah, we'll see. We'll go from there. Anyways, for anyone who made it through all this, thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week, and stay solar.
Stay solar.
Thank you for watching or listening to the Journal of Solar Culture. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and leave us a comment. The first volume of our journal is available in paperback and now, finally, on Kindle. Pick it up in our store or on Amazon.